Hey Roman, how's it going?
Good, good morning, Mark. I'm very well. How are you today?
I'm fine. We've got a topic today. Let's talk about Atlassian Enterprise Rollout. And you have
Mhm.
some information about that today. You figured out what the best playbook looks for an enterprise when they want to roll out this tooling. But first, I would like to ask you, can you tell me a bit about Atlassian? What is that tool for? What kind of sub-tools are there?
Yeah, sure. So I think to understand this a bit better, we need to separate between the tool and the actual producer, so the manufacturer. So Atlassian is a company, and they have various tools. So, for example, the biggest known is probably Jira. Everybody heard about that, or maybe even worked in this. Then you have Confluence, Bitbucket, Jira Product Discovery, and many, many more different tools. Originally, they had these tools to actually help software developers develop better software by issue tracking, creating tickets, and all this classic stuff, right? So if you work Agile, Scrum, or Kanban, to handle all this in Jira. And it used to be a tool which is based on server side or data center. However, Atlassian is moving more and more towards the cloud. And in the cloud, they offer various different pricing plans. And I maybe can explain them quickly, Mark, if that's fine, because then we come better to enterprise.
Mhm.
So you have a free version in the cloud, right? For example, if you want Jira, you go on atlassian.com/Jira, I think, and you can have a look on the product. And up to 10 users, you will use it in a free plan. You have limited functionalities, obviously, but then you can actually use it, work with it. That's pretty cool. And then the next step would be a standard version with more functionalities, a premium version with even more functionalities and better uptime and better service and so on. And then you're ending up in the highest stage, which is called enterprise. And enterprise is, as the name says, actually for enterprises. So we're talking here for organizations with a massive volume of people. So we're not talking about 200 people. We're talking 1,000, 3,000, 6,000 plus, right? So big volume of people. And when you are in the enterprise plan, there are coming a lot of features, which also makes it better for the orchestration and administration of the tooling. And I think today we want to cover a bit this enterprise focus, right?
Yeah, cool, Rom. Thank you. And did you have seen in the past some painful lessons in the companies where you work together to roll out that in the companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a bit of a challenge because if we and if we work with clients together, we come often to the point, when does it make sense to switch from premium to enterprise?
Mhm.
And these are quick lessons you will learn. So if you want to switch from a premium plan to enterprise, you need to know for now you can only have Jira and Confluence in Atlassian enterprise plans. Bitbucket is supposed to come, other products are following, but Jira and Confluence are the most used and biggest tools, and they're available in enterprise. And then you need to take in several considerations when you start switching to enterprise. So one is your user count. How many users do you actually have? If you're talking about a set 200, 300 users, you might not really need to think about that. And then the other big thing, what you need to look at is the apps. And that's also where the painful lessons are coming in, because the apps are actually third-party apps, which you can purchase through the marketplace, right? Atlassian Marketplace, it's like an app store for Jira apps or for Confluence, and they create costs, right? And I think one big painful lesson is for companies, and what we saw also in the field, and where then we help to structure. The cool thing in enterprise is you can shape your cloud environment the way that you optimize it in terms of app costs. What does that mean? I give you an example. If you have an organization, let's say 1,000 software developers, and some of them are developing software, some of them are operating software, some of them maybe are testing the software, right? So you could split your Jira depending on what they are doing. And then depending on that, install on this only the specific ads they need. What does that mean? For example, we would have under the Atlassian Enterprise 3 different parts. One is software development, testing, and operations. And now in these 3 different parts, we only have the apps they actually need. And what does that help me? The thing is, you only pay then for the user count in this specific part for the app. And that's a painful lesson. If you don't know this, you will still have, for all users, all the costs for all the apps, And that's actually the big leverage of the enterprise plan. You can create so-called cloud sites where you create a specific environment for specific use cases with the specific apps, and you only pay for the user once and only for the apps needed in the specific use case. So that's definitely a learning circle there.
What do you think is the leverage here? How much percentage are able to save when we are building the architecture like that you explained before?
Oh, you can easily save 20, 30, 40% from my perspective. I mean, apps are costing a lot of money, right?
By cost
Especially when
saving on
yeah,
apps.
yes, cost saving on apps easily. Because if you look into especially these development apps, right? There are apps called, for example, Sapphire Scale for testing purposes. There are other apps like Big Picture, and they're actually expensive apps, right? We're talking here about $40,000-$50,000 if you're looking at 1,000 users a year, roughly. And if you can reduce this now down to, let's say, we're not using 1,000 users using the app, but only 200, I mean, you can calculate yourself. That's a huge saving. So that's a big impact.
What is the number of an enterprise in your past when you worked with them together? How many users they have in the Atlassian environment? And you just dropped the number of 1,000 users using an app. How many users is typically or normal in an enterprise environment?
So we recently just finished / are finishing a project with one of our clients, and they have 3,500 users in Jira Enterprise and 2,800 in Confluence growing. Okay, so we're looking here at roughly this number. That's a solid number, good starting point, and they're expecting to grow up to 10,000 within the next 2 years. So this is quite a lot of users. It's not little.
Yes.
And maybe just to add on, because I think it's not clear enough what I said before. What you need to understand in a premium plan or a standard plan of Jira or Confluence Cloud, you pay for the user, even if the user is in multiple various different instances. What does that mean? If you have one cloud site for development, one for operations, you need to pay the user twice for standard and premium. The cool thing is, if you go in enterprise, you only pay the user once. It doesn't matter in how many different cloud sites that user is. And that's the big leverage. And, I mean, if you're looking at 10,000, you don't pay that user 3-4 times, you paid once.
Yeah, so the subscription fee is one thing of the costs, but I know you are looking always to the total cost of ownership when you are working with some companies together. And what kind of risks are you also counting in? What costs coming there? When you don't think wisely before what you are doing here?
So I think the big topic is that especially management only looks at subscription cost when you're changing towards enterprise, right? Especially also when you're going to cloud. But that's always like, oh, the subscription cost increase. That means we're more expensive. And that's a very short-term view from my perspective. So total cost of ownership means really the whole bunch. And we like to split it actually in 3 parts, very high level, and you can break them even further down. But technology, and then you have risks and efficiency. And under technology, one small part is the actual subscription fees, right? And you ask about the risks. So in the risks, there are various different areas you can touch. One is, for example, your scenario of if we're getting hacked or not, right? And this is, it sounds so out of the blue, but that's actually the case. And I had 2 clients where this already happened on a data center version, but not in the cloud version. And now you can make your calculations and say, what does it cost me if 10,000 users are not able to work because our system is hacked and we are offline for 3, 4, 5 days? I mean, you can calculate that quickly, right? And that's definitely a risk where I personally believe that enterprise cloud is way more stable. I mean, a guaranteed uptime of 99.97%, I think, is it, or 98 even. So it's 100% looking at realistically highest response time compared to if I host that myself on a data center. I need to have all the administration. I need to take care about everything, security, and so on. Another risk is, for example, if you look at data itself, where is data stored? We often have the requirement from clients in terms of data residency. So my data needs to be in the country where my company is situated, for example, Germany. And then the cool thing is in enterprise, you can choose your data residency. So you can choose which data center is used to store your data, which comes again with GDPR and compliance, which is a risk which you can reduce through this, right? That's another example. So if you look at total cost of ownership, this is definitely an important thing to consider.
So you told us before at the starting point that the decisions quite often are made by looking for the subscription fees. And
Right.
it's a little bit hard to analyze the total cost of ownership's TCO. But who in the company, from your experience, takes the ownership to things like that through? Is that the CIO, or is it who in the company is doing it and who should do it in your perspective?
Right. Unfortunately, this is often pushed to just, and don't get it wrong now, to the system administrator of Atlassian, right? It's said like, this guy is working with Atlassian and he's supposed to do all the calculations and come up with the plan. And this is from my perspective wrong. That person or these people are extremely well in orchestrating the system. But on the other hand, if I talk to them, they also say, we are not the right guys to talk about total cost of ownership and the whole big picture of strategy. And that's always the conflict. You have on the one hand side, the hands-on administrators managing the whole cloud instance to perfection. And they're now supposed to come up with the big strategy, big picture, cost calculation and whatsoever. And that's wrong. What we need actually is we need C-level or at least upper management to jump in and say, look, here's a business case. We have 10,000 users. We're having these risks. We can increase efficiency because we can collaborate better. We can even maybe reduce costs because we don't have data storage our own. We don't have a data center. We can reduce administration effort, etc. And come up with a business case which fits into the strategy. And you just mentioned CIO, into the strategy of the CIO. Ideally, it's on the roadmap of the CIO themselves to harmonize that. Because the bigger thing, what you want to achieve is not just changing from premium to enterprise. The good thing around this is you standardize Atlassian in your enterprise organization. Because what you are able then is you have basically an Atlassian as a service within your whole organization, which you can provide. Because all is going through the central point. You can orchestrate it. You have a total overview of your users. You can optimize based on costs, and a long-term perspective be very stable. So I would see really from a strategy perspective, the CIO in charge, coming up with supported upper management business cases. And on the operational side, you need to get the input, the technical input from your administrators.
Cool. And let's talk about the people in the company, because I think is it easy to tell the people use the tools of Atlassian? Are they easy to use if they don't have used them before? Is it a difference if they are using it in the cloud or on premise? And is this a cultural thing? If it's a company who's already working with some big IT tools that they are just using them as smoothly as they are using SAP or something different? Or is it something like you say, it is so fluent, so good to use, so easy, so convenient that everybody in the company will agree on they should use it and they use it happy? What do you say about that topic, Roman? Because you know I'm the advocate of this question.
I know. I think any tool what you implement needs to create value for you as a user. Otherwise, why is it there, right? I mean, if we use the tool, then it doesn't make sense. The thing is, if you compare now, you ask multiple questions. I will start with data center versus cloud Atlassian. Yes, cloud is more intuitive. Cloud is, from my perspective, the go-to tool. And it's also very publicly pushed by Atlassian in this direction. I can see that a lot of features which are available in the cloud are not available on data center because of technically not possible or even not wanted strategically, I don't know. But the interface, everything is more up to date. There has just recently been a huge new UI release on Atlassian, which makes it even more intuitive for people. So I believe it's a quite intuitive tool with a lot of features and options. I agree. But if you're looking into taking people along the journey, I would definitely say if you're starting on a greenfield, go towards cloud. That's a clear recommendation from my side. I just have one client project in mind where they had various different Atlassian sites in the company. and some were in the cloud, and some are hosted on premise as a data center version. And here the cultural part comes in, what you're saying now, Mark, because several things. Fear of moving towards the cloud is one thing, cultural. The other thing is, well, we are used to our setup here on premise. Why should we now move towards the cloud? What is the added value? What is the benefit? Is it only standardization? Is it only harmonization? And that's obviously a point to argue and also understand in the bigger picture. Do we want to come closer together as one company, or do we have that split? Because what's happening there, unfortunately, we have then two different instances. We need to pay also for the user twice, because one is on premise, one is in the cloud. The collaboration between cloud and data center is a bit tricky. You cannot link it so well. So culturally speaking, you need to take people along the journey, definitely right from the beginning. I mean, I have another client project in mind where we implemented a whole Confluence and Jira process in terms of project management in the cloud. Started very small and repeated and continuously spread this message through internal meetups, through taking people along the journey and also understanding what do they need and what don't they need, right? So maybe that answers a bit your questions you raised.
Nice. I was thinking about also the people in the company are not using only the tools of Atlassian. And so when we work with companies together, you always show the big picture, the whole IT infrastructure, the architecture. And can you tell us a bit about the connections to maybe Salesforce, some other ticket system they are using quite often in the companies and stuff like that? Because there's also a different use case or usability between cloud and on-premise, I guess, no?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look especially in the cloud, they have some feature which is called automations, right? Automations is where you can, as the name says, create automations from simple things like automatically create tickets to very complex things, connecting Atlassian through a REST API with other toolings. And the cool thing is, it's pretty simple and out of the box. It's extremely well documented. You already have a lot of predefined connectors to standard systems, Salesforce, through the marketplace, SAP, and whatsoever. So if you see Atlassian as a island solution in your company, you're completely wrong. Atlassian is covering multiple parts in your journey, but needs to interact with other tools. And that's where I think, especially the cloud version also benefits, because you can easily integrate it. In one of our client projects, we connected their ERP system to Atlassian. And that's often the case, because if you think about from a flow perspective, client request comes in, it goes into ERP, in ERP, there comes an order, a purchase agreement, and so on. All is happening in ERP. But then when you come to the point of execution, you're not going to handle that in ERP. You're going to handle that in some sort of ticket tooling and some sort of issue tracking tooling where Atlassian comes in. But we already collected so much information in the ERP system, which we also want to have available in Atlassian ideally now. And that's exactly where the connections come in. So whenever a new project starts in ERP, it will create it in Atlassian. You can work in Atlassian. You can tell, feedback to the ERP system. Where are we standing in terms of budget, time tracking, and so on. And once the project is done in Atlassian, it will be back synced to the ERP system, as one example. So this is really where the strength is coming in if you are operating in the cloud. And in the enterprise plan, there are unlimited automations included, which means you can do whatever you want, right? Whereas in standard premium, there are limits on the automations.
Cool. I was thinking about before we would implement a software tool, you and I, we was agreeing on that the best process and the flow, what you explained us before, needs to be designed and well thought through by the people in the company. Because I think it's quite valuable that the software tools are something like a support system and not we humans are adjusting to the capabilities of the system. And so can you tell us a bit about the working model and the standards you work on with the teams before you implement and roll out in enterprise this tool landscape?
Yeah, sure. So what you always should do is see the tool as the last part of your implementation, right? If you start with the tool, you're going to adjust everything around the tool. And Atlassian is flexible enough to actually implement how you need it for your specific organization. So it always start with the vision and the direction, the strategy, where and why we want to go there. That can be different levels. That can be on a company level, when you need C-level again and say, this is the bigger picture, we're going in this direction. One big strategy pillar, we are going with all tooling into the cloud, for example, right? And then from there, you need to derive as a next step your clear metrics and objectives and say, okay, Q1, Q2, Q3, what are the things we're going to implement? And there could be one project in there called Atlassian MVP setup, enterprise, whatsoever, right? And when you have all this defined, you need to bring together the right people. So we call that always a seed cell. That's like growing a seed, letting it grow with cross-functional team members, meaning the right people from Atlassian. We need somebody from development. We need maybe somebody from finance, maybe somebody from marketing. Bring the right people from various departments together because we all have a different view on the process. And when you have this, define your rituals, quarterly planning meeting, quarterly review with the C-level to show the progress, what we're working on, regular working sessions, and then you can get started with the implementation. And don't be fooled; it's not going to happen within 2 weeks that everything is set up. You need to give it a bit of time, right? So normally in an Atlassian Enterprise implementation and migration is a thing 1 to 1.5 years. That, just be honest, okay? Otherwise,
just a question, Roman here.
Sure.
What do you think on the roadmap when you say it's 1 to 2 years? What is maybe some big things that need to be done in the first 6 months? What needs to be done after a year? What comes up in the next year? Because quite often the company starts on premise, what we see, no? And they have some Atlassian tooling in the company, and the mindset is they are on premise. And can you give us here some hints or some big chunks on the roadmap? What comes up there typically?
Yeah. So the first big thing is we need a clear decision from management saying, yes, we're going to the cloud. And that sounds so simple, but often we see even half a year later, this decision hasn't been done yet. And then you're basically stuck in, you need a clear decision from a money perspective. So total cost of ownership again. Yes, we're doing this, right? This is a strategic initiative we want to do, and we're moving towards that. And then actually, you should early get also in touch with Atlassian, because when you are on premise and you're moving towards enterprise cloud, there are some benefits. You can get double licensing for a certain amount of time, meaning you don't need to pay the full amount on both sides because they support the change from data center towards enterprise. So get Atlassian on board early enough and understand your framework. So we need to clearly assess the current situation. How many users do we have? What are the use cases? What apps do we have in Jira? What apps do we have in Confluence? Do we have double ups? All this whole landscape needs to be very, very clear. How many projects do we have in Atlassian? How complex are our permission schemes, and so on? So we need to actually understand the current setup very well to know, are we moving that whole thing from left to right? Or are we taking parts and creating newer things in the cloud? Because you don't want to take all the old legacy with you if not needed. And once you have this done, I would always start with piloting. So I would not move the whole big bunch, which is unrealistic. You try to find a good project, a good user group, and start moving from the data center towards the cloud. Test if everything works. And in the cloud, I would always recommend to set up a sandbox environment, which you have in the Atlassian Enterprise plan. Test everything if it works, and once it works, go into the production environment. And then bit by bit, create the cloud movement from data center to the cloud. And once you are in the cloud, then come up with the next steps of implementing features and so on. I think one big thing is always, if you're working in an enterprise, also to connect it to your single sign-on provider. Mainly it is Microsoft 365, right? That you can interact with and log in with your standard credentials. That's also a very convenient thing if you're in the cloud, because that comes with the enterprise plan as well, that you can just quickly set up the SSO and so on. Comes also with premium and standard, but these are things you need to consider when you're looking into it. And then show early success towards management. See, like, look guys, we're here, we achieved this and that.
Cool, thank you. So on the roadmap, on the big picture, when you look over 1 to 2 years, there are smaller groups coming from on-premise into the cloud, and
Yes.
the final destination is cloud. but in between, is there something like a hybrid scenario going on, or how do you call
Yeah,
that
that's
in your
that's
space?
exactly what I mean. Also, what this dual licensing from Atlassian is about. It's
Yeah.
roughly a year, 1.5, where you have both parallel because you're
Yes.
not switching off the one and ramping up the other one. So you can call it hybrid cloud approach, where you have data
Mhm.
center and the cloud, and
Mhm.
then gently switch from the one to the other. Also
Mhm.
to not, I mean, technically it would probably be easy doable, but it's humans,
Yeah.
it's culture, it's taking
Culture.
people
Yeah.
along. And you need this time to teach people, to upskill people, to standardize processes. Also on the administration side, managing and administering the cloud has a different perspective than on data centers. So if you have Jira admins and Atlassian admins, you need to also take them along the journey.
What is
That's why this
your
hybrid cloud. Sorry.
Yeah, cool. Just you mentioned the admins, and my question here is, what are your thoughts around the topic first, second level support here? How do you structure that in context of Atlassian? What are your thoughts? If you are an enterprise who has facilities around the world and
Yeah.
want to be available 24 hours, maybe 5 days a week, how do you can structure that?
So for the perspective of their clients or for internal purposes? Because I
Internal
mean, they're
purposes.
internal. Okay.
Hmm.
So I would always say if you're in an Atlas environment, choose also the product Jira Service Management, which is the ITSM tool, so the support tooling from Atlassian, because
Hmm.
then you are in the whole flow and it connects with Jira and Confluence. And then I would open up Jira Service Management has a portal function, a self-help portal. Which you can open up, for example, mycompany.help.com, whatever it is. And then you can go there. And ideally, you have a good guide and Confluence built up where you can help yourself first as a user for things like I cannot log in, do the following steps, or whatever it is, right? And then obviously through this portal, you can raise tickets. And these tickets then come into Jira Service Management, which is your first level support. And ideally, you have a first level support team which is capable enough to resolve as many problems as possible directly in Jira Service Management without going into second or even third level.
Hmm.
And if not possible, because it's a complex problem or it's a big request you're having, you might need to create from Jira Service Management a ticket in Jira for the backlog of the
Hmm.
specific team and then handle it further. That's how I would structure it and set it up.
Cool, Roman. Thank you very much. So
Sure.
from my perspective, we talked a lot about the myth in the enterprise world when you want to scale Atlassian toolings. And thank you for the insights here. And I think we know exactly now what we need to expect. The tooling is going to the cloud. Everything will be there in 2 to 3 years. So the enterprises all around the world should be preparing for that. And
Agreed.
they don't should delegate it to the IT department. They need to have
No.
ownership at the C level here. And maybe the CIOs think about the architecture of the IT infrastructure with the tools together there. And maybe some 2 or 3 last words, what you would say to a CIO when you have 5 minutes with him together, what you need to tell him when he wants to scale his company with Atlassian in the future.
Get together with your enterprise architect, with your administrators, and somebody from finance. Run a workshop looking at total cost of ownership, outline a strategy, and come up with a strong business case to implement Atlassian Enterprise. That's my go-to word.
Thank you very much, Roman. Cool.
Thank you. See you then in the next podcast, Mark, I hope.
Of course. Thank you, Roman. Have a nice day. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.